Rio Grande's Last Race by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox by Aaron Grassi. Now this is what Macpherson told while waiting in the stand. A reckless rider, overbold, the only man with hands to hold the rushing Rio Grande. He said, "This day I bid goodbye to bitten bridle rein, to ditches deep and fences high, for I have dreamed a dream, and I shall never ride again. I dreamt last night I rode this race that I today must ride, and cantering down to take my place, I saw full many an old friend's face come stealing to my side. Dead men on horses, long since dead, they clustered on the track. The champions of the days long fled, they moved around with noiseless tread, bay, chestnut, brown, and black. And one man on a big gray steed rode up and waved his hand. Said he, 'We help a friend in need, and we have come to give the lead to you in Rio Grande. For you must give the field a slip, so never draw the rein. But keep him moving with the whip, and if he falter, set your lip and rouse him up again. But when you reach the big stone wall, put down your bridle hand and let him sail. He cannot fall. But don't you interfere at all. You trust old Rio Grande.' We started, and in front we showed the big horse running free. Right fearlessly and game he strode, and by my side those dead men rode whom no one else could see. As silent as flies a bird, they rode on either hand. At every fence I plainly heard the phantom leader give the word, 'Make room for Rio Grande!' I spurred him on to get the lead. I chanced full many a fall. But swifter still each phantom steed kept with me, and at racing speed we reached the big stone wall. And there the phantoms on each side drew in and blocked his leap. 'Make room! Make room!' I loudly cried. But right in front they seemed to ride. I cursed them in my sleep. He never flinched. He faced it game. He struck it with his chest, and every stone burst out in flame, and Rio Grande and I became as phantoms with the rest. And then I woke, and for a space all nerveless did I seem. For I have ridden many a race, but never one at such a pace as in this fearful dream. And I am sure, as man can be, that out upon the track, those phantoms that men cannot see are waiting now to ride with me, and I shall not come back. For I must ride the dead man's race and follow their command. 'Twere worse than death, the foul disgrace, if I should fear to take my place today on Rio Grande." He mounted, and a jest he threw, with never sign of gloom, but all who heard the story knew that Jack Macpherson, brave and true, was going to his doom. They started, and the big black steed came flashing past the stand. All single-handed in the lead, he strode along at racing speed, the mighty Rio Grande. But on his ribs the whalebone stung, a madness did it seem, and soon it rose on every tongue that Jack Macpherson rode among the creatures of his dream. He looked to left, and he looked to right, as though men rode beside. And Rio Grande, with foam flecks white, raced at his jumps in headlong flight and cleared them in his stride. But when they reached the big stone wall, down went the bridle hand, and loud we heard Macpherson call, "Make room, or half the field will fall! Make room for Rio Grande!" "He's down! He's down!" And horse and man lay quiet side by side. No need the pallid face to scan. We knew with Rio Grande he ran the race that dead men ride. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
By the Grey Gulf Water by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Zechariah Rahman. Far to the northward there lies a land, a wonderful land that the wind blows over, and none may fathom or understand the charm it holds for the restless rover. A great grey chaos, a land half made, where endless space is and no life stirreth, and the soul of a man will recoil afraid from the sphinx-like visage that nature weareth. But old Dame Nature, though scornful, craves her dole of death and her share of slaughter. Many indeed are the nameless graves where her victims sleep by the grey gulf water. Slowly and slowly those grey streams glide, drifting along with languid motion, lapping the reed beds on either side, wending their way to the northern ocean. Grey are the plains where the emus pass, silent and slow with their staid demeanour. Over the dead man's graves the grass, maybe, is waving a trifle greener. Down in the world where men toil and spin, Dame Nature smiles as man's hand has taught her. Only the dead men her smiles can win in the great low land by grey gulf water. For the strength of a man is an insect's strength in the face of that mighty plain and river, and the life of a man is a moment's length to the life of the stream that will run forever. And so it cometh they will take no part in small world worries. Each hardy rover rideth abroad and is light of heart, with the plains around and the blue sky over. And up in the heavens the brown lark sings the songs that the strange wild land has taught her. Full of thanksgiving her sweet song rings, and I wish I were back by the grey gulf water. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
With the Cattle by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Algie Pug. The drought is down on field and flock, the river bed is dry, and we must shift the starving stock before the cattle die. We muster up with weary hearts at breaking of the day, and turn our heads to foreign parts to take the stock away. And it's hunt 'em up and dog 'em, and it's get the whip and flog 'em, for it's weary work is droving when they're dying every day. By stock routes bare and eaten, on dusty roads and beaten, with half a chance to save their lives, we take the stock away. We cannot use the whip for shame on beasts that crawl along. We have to drop the weak and lame and try to save the strong. The wrath of God is on the track, the drought fiend holds his sway. With blows and cries and stock whip crack, we take the stock away. As they fall, we leave them lying, with the crows to watch them dying, grim sextons of the overland that fasten on their prey. By the fiery dust storm drifting, and a mocking mirage shifting, in heat and drought and hopeless pain, we take the stock away. In dull despair the days go by, with never hope of change, but every stage we draw more nigh towards the mountain range. And some may live to climb the pass, and reach the great plateau, and revel in the mountain grass, by streamlets fed with snow. As the mountain wind is blowing, it starts the cattle lowing, and calling to each other down the dusty long array. And there speaks a grizzled drover, "Well, thank God the worst is over. The creatures smell the mountain grass that's 20 miles away." They press towards the mountain grass, they look with eager eyes along the rugged stony pass that slopes towards the skies. Their feet may bleed from rocks and stones, but though the blood drop starts, they struggle on with stifled groans, for hope is in their hearts. and the cattle that are leading, though their feet are worn and bleeding, are breaking to a kind of run. Pull up and let them go, for the mountain wind is blowing and the mountain grass is growing. They settle down by running streams ice cold with melted snow. The days are done of heat and drought upon the stricken plain. The wind has shifted right about and brought the welcome rain. The river runs with sullen roar, all flecked with yellow foam, and we must take the road once more to bring the cattle home. And it's, "Lads, we'll raise a chorus, there's a pleasant trip before us," and the horses bound beneath us as we start them down the track, and the drovers canter, singing, through the sweet green grasses springing, towards the far-off mountain land, to bring the cattle back. Are these the beasts we brought away that move so lively now? They scatter off like flying spray across the mountain's brow, and dashing down the rugged range we hear the stock whip crack. Good faith, it is a welcome change to bring such cattle back. And it's, "Steady down the lead there," and it's, "Let 'em stop and feed there," for they're wild as mountain eagles and their sides are all afoam, but they're settling down already, and they'll travel nice and steady. With cheery call and jest and song, we fetch the cattle home. We have to watch them close at night, for fear they'll make a rush, and break away in headlong flight across the open bush, and by the campfire's cheery blaze, with mellow voice and strong, we hear the lonely watchman raise the overlander's song. Oh, it's when we're done with roving, with the camping and the droving, it's homeward down the bland we'll go, and never more we'll roam, while the stars shine out above us, like the eyes of those who love us, the eyes of those who watch and wait to greet the cattle home. The plains are all awave with grass, the skies are deepest blue, and leisurely the cattle pass and feed the long day through. But when we sight the station gate, we make the stock whips crack, a welcome sound to those who wait to greet the cattle back. And through the twilight falling we hear their voices calling, as the cattle splash across the ford and churn it into foam. And the children run to meet us, and our wives and sweethearts greet us, they're heroes from the overland who brought the cattle home. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Mulga Bill's Bicycle by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Steve C. 'Twas Mulga Bill from Eaglehawk that caught the cycling craze. He turned away the good old horse that served him many days. He dressed himself in cycling clothes, resplendent to be seen. He hurried off to town and bought a shining new machine. And as he wheeled it through the door, with an air of lordly pride, the grinning shop assistant said, "Excuse me, can you ride?" "See here, young man," said Mulga Bill, "from Walgett to the sea, from Conroy's Gap to Castlereagh, there's none can ride like me. I'm good all round at everything, as everybody knows. Although I'm not the one to talk, I hate a man that blows. But riding is my special gift, my chiefest sole delight. Just ask a wild duck, can it swim? A wildcat, can it fight? There's nothing clothed in hair or hide, or built of flesh or steel. There's nothing walks or jumps or runs on axle, hoof or wheel, but what I'll sit while hide will hold and girths and straps are tight. I'll ride this here two-wheeled concern right straight away at sight." 'Twas Mulga Bill from Eaglehawk that sought his own abode. that perched above the Dead Man's Creek, beside the mountain road. He turned the cycle down the hill and mounted for the fray, but ere he'd gone a dozen yards it bolted clean away. It left the track and through the trees, just like a silver streak, it whistled down the awful slope towards the Dead Man's Creek. It shaved a stump by half an inch, it dodged a big white box. The very wallaroos in fright went scrambling up the rocks. The wombats hiding in their caves dug deeper underground, as Mulga Bill, as white as chalk, sat tight to every bound. It struck a stone and gave a spring that cleared a fallen tree. It raced beside a precipice, as close could be. And then, as Mulga Bill let out one last despairing shriek, it made a leap of 20 feet into the Dead Man's Creek. 'Twas Mulga Bill from Eaglehawk that slowly swam ashore. He said, "I've had some narrow shaves and lively rides before. I've rode a wild bull round a yard to win a £5 bet, but this was the most awful ride that I've encountered yet. I'll give that two-wheeled outlaw best, it's shaken all my nerve, to feel it whistle through the air and plunge and buck and swerve. It's safe at rest in Dead Man's Creek, we'll leave it lying still. A horse's back is good enough henceforth for Mulga Bill." End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Pearl Diver by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Algie Pug. Kanzo Makame, the diver, sturdy and small Japanese, seeker of pearls and of pearl shell down in the depths of the sea, trudged o'er the bed of the ocean, searching industriously. Over the pearl grounds the lugger drifted, a little white speck. Joe Nagasaki, the tender, holding the lifeline on deck, talked through the rope to the diver, knew when to drift or to check. Kanzo was king of his lugger, master and diver in one, diving wherever it pleased him, taking instructions from none. Hither and thither he wandered, steering by stars and by sun. Fearless he was beyond credence, looking at death eye to eye. This was his formula always. All man go dead by and by. S'posing time come, no can help it. S'pose time no come, then no die. Dived in the depths of the Darnleys, down 20 fathom and 5, down where by law and by reason men are forbidden to dive, down in a pressure so awful that only the strongest survive. Sweated 4 men at the air pumps, fast as the handles could go, forcing the air down that reached him, heated, tainted, and slow. Kanzo Makame the diver stayed 7 minutes below. Came up on deck like a dead man, paralysed body and brain, suffered while blood was returning, infinite tortures of pain. Sailed once again to the Darnleys, laughed, and descended again. Scarce grew the shell in the shallows, rarely a patch could they touch. Always the take was so little, always the labour so much. Always they thought of the islands held by the lumbering Dutch. Islands where shell was in plenty, lying in passage and bay. Islands where divers could gather hundreds of shell in a day. But the lumbering Dutch with their gunboats hunted the divers away. Joe Nagasaki, the tender, finding the profits grow small, said, "Let us go to the islands, try for number 1 haul. If we get caught, go to prison. Let them take lugger and all." Kanzo Makame, the diver, knowing full well what it meant, fatalist, gambler, and stoic, smiled a broad smile of content, flattened in mainsail and foresail, and off to the islands they went. Close to the headlands they drifted, picking up shell by the ton. Piled up on deck were the oysters, opening wide in the sun, when from the lee of the headland boomed the report of a gun. Once that the diver was sighted, pearl shell and lugger must go. Joe Nagasaki decided. Quick was the word and the blow. Cut both the pipe and the lifeline, leaving the diver below. Kanzo Makame, the diver, failing to quite understand, pulled the haul up on the lifeline, found it was slack in his hand. Then, like a little brown stoic, lay down and died on the sand. Joe Nagasaki, the tender, smiling a sanctified smile, headed her straight for the gunboat, throwing out shells all the while. Then went aboard and reported, "No makee dive in 3 mile. Dress no have got and no helmet. Diver go shore on the spree. Plenty wind come and break rudder. Lugger get blown out to sea. Take me to Japanese consul. He help a poor Japanese." So the Dutch let him go, and they watched him, as off from the islands he ran, doubting him much, but what would you? You have to be sure of your man, ere you wake up that nest full of hornets, the little brown men of Japan. Down in the ooze and the coral, down where earth's wonders are spread, helmeted, ghastly and swollen, Kanzo Makame lies dead. Joe Nagasaki his tender, his owner and diver instead. Wearer of pearls in your necklace, comfort yourself if you can. These are the risks of the pearling, these are the ways of Japan. Plenty more Japanese diver, plenty more little brown man. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. The City of Dreadful Thirst by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Algie Pug. The stranger came from Narromine and made his little joke. They say we folks in Narromine are narrow-minded folk, but all the smartest men down here are puzzled to define a kind of new phenomenon that came to Narromine. Last summer up in Narromine 'twas gettin' rather warm, 200 in the water bag and looking like a storm. We all were in the private bar, the coolest place in town, when out along the stretch of plain a cloud came rollin' down. We don't respect the clouds up there, they fill us with disgust. They mostly bring a bogan shower, 3 raindrops and some dust. But each man, simultaneous like, to each man said, "I think that cloud suggests it's up to us to have another drink." There's clouds of rain and clouds of dust, we've heard of them before, and sometimes in the daily press we read of clouds of war. But if this ain't the gospel truth, I hope that I may burst. That cloud that came to Narromine was just a cloud of thirst. It wasn't like a common cloud, 'twas more a sort of haze. It settled down about the streets and stopped for days and days. And not a drop of dew could fall, and not a sunbeam shine to pierce that dismal sort of mist that hung on Narromine. Oh, Lord! We had a dreadful time beneath that cloud of thirst. We all chucked up our daily work and went upon the burst. The very blacks about the town that used to cadge for grub, they made an organised attack and tried to loot the pub. We couldn't leave the private bar, no matter how we tried. Shearers and squatters, union men and blacklegs, side by side, were drinking there and durstn't move, for each was sure, he said, before he'd get a half a mile, the thirst would strike him dead. We drank until the drink gave out. We searched from room to room, and round the pub, like drunken ghosts, went howling through the gloom. The shearers found some kerosene and settled down again, but all the squatter chaps and I, we staggered to the train. And, once outside the cloud of thirst, we felt as right as pie. But while we stopped about the town, we had to drink or die. But now I hear it's safe enough, I'm going back to work, because they say the cloud of thirst has shifted on to Burke. But when you see those clouds about, like this one over here, all white and frothy at the top, just like a pint of beer, it's time to go and have a drink, for if that cloud should burst, you'd find the drink would all be gone, for that's a cloud of thirst. We stood the man from Narromine a pint of half and half. He drank it off without a gasp in one tremendous quaff. "I joined some friends last night," he said, "in what they called a spree. But after Narromine 'twas just a holiday to me." And now beyond the western range, where sunset skies are red, and clouds of dust and clouds of thirst go drifting overhead, the railway train is taking back, along the western line, that narrow-minded person on his road to Narromine. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. Saltbush Bill's Gamecock by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Algie Pug. 'Twas Saltbush Bill, with his travelling sheep, was making his way to town. He crossed them over the Hard Times Run, and he came to the Take 'em Down. He counted through at the Boundary Gate, and camped at the drafting yard. For Stingy Smith of the Hard Times Run had hunted him rather hard. He bore no malice to Stingy Smith. 'Twas simply the hand of fate that caused his waggon to swerve aside and shatter old Stingy's gate. And, being only the hand of fate, it follows, without a doubt, it wasn't the fault of Saltbush Bill that Stingy's sheep got out. So Saltbush Bill, with an easy heart, prepared for what might befall, commenced his stages on Take 'em Down, the station of Rooster Hall. 'Tis strange how often men out back will take to some curious craft, some ruling passion to keep their thoughts away from the overdraft. And Rooster Hall, of the Take 'em Down, was widely known to fame as breeder of champion fighting cocks. His forte was the British game. The passing stranger within his gates that camped with old Rooster Hall was forced to talk about fowls all night, or else not talk at all. Though droughts should come, and though sheep should die, his fowls were his sole delight. He left his shed in the flood of work to watch two gamecocks fight. He held in scorn the Australian game, that long-legged child of sin. In a desperate fight, with the steel-tipped spurs, the British game must win. The Australian bird was a mongrel bird, with a touch of the jungle cock. The want of breeding must find him out, when facing the English stock. For British breeding and British pluck must triumph it over all, and that was the root of the simple creed that governed old Rooster Hall. 'Twas Saltbush Bill to the station rode ahead of his travelling sheep, and sent a message to Rooster Hall that wakened him out of his sleep. A crafty message that fetched him out and hurried him as he came. "A drover has an Australian bird to match with your British game." 'Twas done, and done in half a trice, a £5 note aside. Old Rooster Hall with his champion bird, and the drover's bird untried. "Steel spurs, of course," said old Rooster Hall. "He'll need 'em without a doubt." "You stick the spurs on your bird," said Bill, "but mine fights best without." "Fights best without?" said old Rooster Hall. "He can't fight best unspurred. You must be crazy." But Saltbush Bill said, "Wait till you see my bird." So Rooster Hall to his fowl yard went, and quickly back he came, bearing a clipped and shaven cock, the pride of his English game. With an eye as fierce as an eagle hawk, and a crow like a trumpet call, he strutted about on the garden walk, and cackled at Rooster Hall. Then Rooster Hall sent off a boy with a word to his cronies too, Macrae, the boss of the Black Police, and Father Donahue. Full many a cockfight old Macrae had held in his empty court, with Father D as a picker-up, a regular all-round sport. They got the message of Rooster Hall, and down to his run they came, prepared to scoff at the drover's bird, and to bet on the English game. They hied them off to the drover's camp, while Saltbush rode before. Old Rooster Hall was a blithesome man, when he thought of the treat in store. They reached the camp, where the drover's cook, with countenance all serene, was boiling beef in an iron pot, but never a fowl was seen. "Take off the beef from the fire," said Bill, "and wait till you see the fight. There's something fresh for the bill of fare. There's game fowl stew tonight. For Mr. Hall has a fighting cock, all feathered and clipped and spurred, and he's fetched him here for a bit of sport to fight our Australian bird. I've made a match that our pet will win, though he's hardly a fighting cock. But he's game enough, and it's many a mile that he's tramped with a travelling stock." The cook he banged on a saucepan lid, and, soon as the sound was heard, under the dray in the shadows hid, a something moved and stirred. A great tame emu strutted out. Said Saltbush, "Here's our bird." But Rooster Hall, and his cronies too, drove home without a word. The passing stranger within his gates that camps with old Rooster Hall must talk about something else than fowls, if he wishes to talk at all. For the record lies in the local court, and filed in its deepest vault, that Peter Hall, of the Take-em Down, was tried for a fierce assault on a stranger man, who, in all good faith, and prompted by what he heard, had asked old Hall if a British game could beat an Australian bird. And old Macrae, who was on the bench, as soon as the case was tried, remarked, "Discharged, with a clean discharge, the assault was justified." End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Hay and Helen Bullagol by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by T.J. Burns. "You come and see me, boys," he said. "You'll find a welcome and a bed, and whiskey any time you call. Although our township hasn't got the name of quite a lovely spot, you see I live in Bullagul. And people have an awful down upon the district and the town, which worse than hell itself they call. In fact, the saying far and wide along the Riverina side is hay and hail in Bullagul. No doubt it suits 'em very well to say it's worse than hay or hell, but don't you heed their talk at all. Of course there's heat, no one denies, and sand and dust and stacks of flies, and rabbits too at Bullagul. But such a pleasant, quiet place. You never see a stranger's face. They hardly ever care to call, and drovers mostly pass it by. They reckon that they'd rather die than spend a night in Bullagul. The big mosquitoes frighten some. You'll lie awake to hear 'em hum. And snakes about the township crawl. But shearers, when they get their check, they never come along and wreck the blessed town of Bullagul. But down in Hay the shearers come, and fill themselves with fighting rum, and chase blue devils up the wall, and fight the snaggers every day until there is the deuce to pay. There's none of that in Bullagul. Of course, there isn't much to see. The billiard table used to be the great attraction for us all until some careless drunken curs got sleeping on it in their spurs and ruined it in Bullagul. Just now there is a howling drought that pretty near has starved us out. It never seems to rain at all, but if there should come any rain, you couldn't cross the black soil plain. you'd have to stop in Booligal. We'd have to stop. With bated breath, we prayed that both in life and death our fate in other lines might fall. Oh, send us to our just reward, in hay or hell, but gracious Lord, deliver us from Booligal. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
A Walgett Episode by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Son of the Exiles. A Walgett Episode. The sun strikes down with a blinding glare. The skies are blue and the plains are wide. The saltbush plains that are burnt and bare by Walgett out on the Barwon side. The Barwon River that wanders down in a leisurely manner by Walgett town. There came a stranger, a cockatoo, the word means farmer, as all men know, who dwell in the land where the kangaroo barks loud at dawn and the white-eyed crow uplifts his song on the stockyard fence as he watches the lambkins passing hence. The sunburnt stranger was gaunt and brown, but it soon appeared that he meant to flout the iron law of the country town, which is that the stranger has got to shout. If he will not shout, we must take him down, remarked the yokels of Walgett town. They baited a trap with a crafty bait, for they held discourse concerning a new chum who, of late, had bought such a thoroughly lazy horse, they would wager that no one could ride him down the length of the city of Walgett town. The stranger was born on a horse's hide, so he took the wagers and made them good with his hard-earned cash, but his hopes they died, for the horse was a clothes horse made of wood. 'Twas a well-known horse that had taken down full many a stranger in Walgett town. The stranger smiled with a sickly smile, 'tis a sickly smile that the loser grins, and he said he had travelled for quite a while in trying to sell some marsupial skins, and I thought that perhaps as you've took me down you would buy them from me in Walgett town. He said that his home was at Wingadee, where he had for sale some 50 skins, and would guarantee they were full-sized skins with the ears and tail complete, and he sold 'em for money down to a venturesome buyer in Walgett town. Then he smiled a smile as he pouched the pelf. I'm glad that I'm quit of them, win or lose. You can fetch them in when it suits yourself, and you'll find the skins on the kangaroos. Then he left, and the silence settled down like a tangible thing upon Walgett town. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Father Reillys' Horse by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Phil Schempf. 'Twas the horse thief, Andy Regan, that was hunted like a dog by the troopers of the Upper Murray side. They had searched in every gully, they had looked in every log, but never sight or track of him they spied. Till the priest at Kiley's Crossing heard a knocking very late, and a whisper, "Father Reilly, come across." So his reverence in pajamas trotted softly to the gate, and admitted Andy Regan and a horse. "Now it's listen, Father Reilly, to the words I've got to say, for it's close upon my death I am tonight. With the troopers hard behind me I've been hiding all the day in the gullies, keeping close and out of sight. But they're watching all the ranges till there's not a bird could fly, and I'm fairly worn to pieces with the strife. So I'm taking no more trouble, but I'm going home to die. 'Tis the only way I see to save my life. Yes, I'm making home to mother's, and I'll die o' Tuesday next, and be buried on the Thursday, and of course I'm prepared to meet my penance, but with one thing I'm perplexed, and Father, it's this jewel of a horse. He was never bought nor paid for, and there's not a man can swear to his owner or his breeder, but I know that his sire was by Pedantic from the old Pretender mare, and his dam was close related to the roe. And there's nothing in the district that can race him for a step. He could canter while they're going at their top. He's the king of all the lepers that was ever seen to lep. A 5-foot fence, he'd clear it in a hop. So I'll leave him with you, Father, till the dead shall rise again. 'Tis yourself that knows a good 'un, and of course you can say he's got by moonlight out of Paddy Murphy's plain, if you're ever asked the breeding of the horse. But it's getting on to daylight, and it's time to say good-bye, for the stars above the east are growing pale. And I'm making home to mother, and it's hard for me to die, but it's harder still is keeping out of jail. You can ride the old horse over to my grave across the dip, where the wattle bloom is waving overhead. Sure he'll jump them fences easy, you must never raise the whip, or he'll rush 'em. Now good-bye, and he fled. So they buried Andy Regan, and they buried him to rights, in the graveyard at the back of Kiley's Hill. There were 25 mourners, who had 25 fights, till the very boldest fighters had their fill. There were 50 horses racing from the graveyard to the pub, and their riders flogged each other all the while. And the lashins of the liquor, and the lavins of the grub, oh, poor Andy went to rest in proper style. Then the races came to Kiley's, with a steeplechase and all, for the folk were mostly Irish roundabout, and it takes an Irish rider to be fearless of a fall. They were training morning in and morning out. But they never started training till the sun was on the course, for a superstitious story kept 'em back, that the ghost of Andy Regan on a slashing chestnut horse had been training by the starlight on the track. And they read the nominations for the races with surprise, and amusement at the father's little joke. For a novice had been entered for the steeplechasing prize, and they found that it was Father Reillys' moke. He was neat enough to gallop, he was strong enough to stay, but his owner's views of training were immense, for the Reverend Father Reilly used to ride him every day, and he never saw a hurdle nor a fence. And the priest would join the laughter. "Oh," said he, "I'll put him in, for there's 25 sovereigns to be won. And the poor would find it useful if the chestnut chanced to win, and he'll maybe win when all is said and done." He had called him Fa Bala, which is French for clear the course, and his colours were a vivid shade of green. All the Dooleys and O'Donnells were on Father Reilly's horse, while the Orangemen were backing Mandarine. It was Hogan, the dog poisoner, aged man and very wise, who was camping in the racecourse with his swag, and who ventured the opinion, to the township's great surprise, that the race would go to Father Reilly's nag. You can talk about your riders, and the horse has not been schooled, and the fences is terrific and the rest. When the field is fairly going, then you'll see you've all been fooled, and the chestnut horse will battle with the best. For there's some has got condition, and they think the race is sure, and the chestnut horse will fall beneath the weight. But the hopes of all the helpless and the prayers of all the poor will be running by his side to keep him straight. And it's what's the need of schooling or working on the track when the saids are there to guide him round the course? I've prayed him over every fence, I've prayed him out and back, and I bet my cash on Father Reilly's horse. Oh, the steeple was a caution. They went tearing round and round, and the fences rang and rattled where they struck. There was some that cleared the water, there was more fell in and drowned, some blamed the men and others blamed the luck. But the whips were flying freely when the field came into view, for the finish down the long green stretch of course. And in front of all the flyers, jumping like a kangaroo, came the rank outsider, Father Reilly's horse. Oh, the shouting and the cheering as he rattled past the post, for he left the others standing in the straight. And the rider, well, they reckoned it was Andy Regan's ghost, and it beat him how a ghost would draw the weight. But he weighed it 9 stone 7, then he laughed and disappeared, like a banshee, which is Spanish for an elf. And old Hogan muttered sagely, if it wasn't for the beard, they'd be thinking it was Andy Regan's self. And the poor of Kiley's Crossing drank the health at Christmastide of the chestnut and his rider dressed in green. There was never such a rider, not since Andy Regan died, and they wondered who on earth he could have been. But they settled it among them, for the story got about, mongst the bushmen and the people on the course, that the devil had been ordered to let Andy Regan out for the steeplechase on Father Reillys' horse. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Scotch Engineer by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Aaron Grassi. The Scotch Engineer. With eyes that searched in the dark, peering along the line, stood the grim Scotchman Hector Clark, driver of 49, and the veldt fire flamed on the hills ahead like a blood-red beacon sign. There was word of a fight to the north and a column hard pressed, so they started the Highlanders forth, without food, without rest. But the pipers gaily played, chanting their fierce delight, and the armored carriages rocked and swayed, laden with men of the Scotch Brigade, hurrying up to the fight, and the grim grey Highland engineer driving them into the night. Then a signal light glowed red, and a picket came to the track. "Enemy holding the line ahead. 3 of our mates we have left for dead, only we 2 got back." And far to the north, through the still night air, they heard the rifles crack, and the boom of a gun rang out, like the sound of a deep appeal, and the picket stood in doubt by the side of the driving wheel. But the engineer looked down with his hand on the starting bar. "Ride ye back to the town. Ye know what my orders are. Maybe they're wanting the Scotch Brigade up on those hills afar. I am no soldier at all, only an engineer, but I could not bear that the folk should say, over in Scotland, Glasgow way, that Hector Clark stayed here with the Scotch Brigade till the foe were gone, with ever a rail to run her on. Ready behind, stand clear. Firemen, get you gone, into the armored train. I will drive her alone, one more trip, and perhaps the last, with a well-raked fire and an open blast. Hark to the rifles again." On through the choking dark, never a lamp nor a light, never an engine spark showing her hurried flight. Over the lonely plain rushed the great armored train, hurrying up to the fight. Then, with her living freight, onto the foe she came, and the rifles snapped their hate, and the darkness spouted flame. Over the roar of the fray the hungry bullets whined as she dashed to the foe that lay loading and firing blind, till the glare of the furnace burning clear showed them the form of the engineer sharply and well defined. Through! They were safely through! Hark to the column's cheer! Surely the driver knew he was to halt her here? But he took no heed of the signals red, and the fireman found when he climbed ahead, there, on the floor of his engine, dead, lay the Scotch engineer. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Song of the Future by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Diana Schmidt. 'Tis strange that in a land so strong and bold in mighty youth, we have no poet's voice of truth to sing for us a wondrous song. Our chiefest singer yet has sung in wild, sweet notes a passing strain, all carelessly and sadly flung to that dull world he thought so vain. I care for nothing, good nor bad, my hopes are gone, my pleasures fled, I am but sifting sand, he said. What wonder Gordon's songs were sad! And yet, not always sad and hard, in cheerful mood and light of heart, he told the tale of Britomart, and wrote the rhyme of Joyous Guard. And some have said that nature's face to us is always sad, but these have never felt the smiling grace of waving grass and forest trees on sunlit plains as wide as seas. A land where dull despair is king, or scentless flower and songless bird, but we have heard the bell-birds ring their silver bells at eventide, like fairies on the mountain side, the sweetest note man ever heard. The wild thrush lifts a note of mirth, the bronze-winged pigeons call and coo beside their nests the long day through. The magpie warbles clear and strong, a joyous, glad, thanksgiving song for all God's mercies upon earth. And many voices such as these are joyful sounds for those to tell who know the bush and love it well, with all its hidden mysteries. We cannot love the restless sea that rolls and tosses to and fro like some fierce creature in its glee. For human weal or human woe, it has no touch of sympathy. For us the bush is never sad, its myriad voices whisper low, in tones the bushmen only know, its sympathy and welcome glad. For us the roving breezes bring from many a blossom-tufted tree, where wild bees murmur dreamily, the honey-laden breath of spring. We have no tales of other days, no bygone history to tell. Our tales are told where campfires blaze at midnight, when the solemn hush of that vast wonderland, the bush, hath laid on every heart its spell. Although we have no songs of strife, of bloodshed reddening the land, we yet may find achievements grand within the bushman's quiet life. Lift ye your faces to the sky, ye far blue mountains to the west, who lie so peacefully at rest, enshrouded in a haze of blue. 'Tis hard to feel that years went by before the pioneers broke through your rocky heights and walls of stone, and made your secrets all their own. For years the fertile western plains were hid behind your sullen walls, your cliffs and crags and waterfalls, all weather-worn with tropic rains. Between the mountains and the sea, like Israelites with staff in hand, the people waited restlessly. They looked towards the mountains old, and saw the sunsets come and go, with gorgeous golden afterglow, that made the west a fairy land, and marveled what that west might be, of which such wondrous tales were told. For tales were told of inland seas, like sullen oceans, salt and dead, and sandy deserts, white and wan, where never trod the foot of man, nor bird went winging overhead, nor ever stirred a gracious breeze to wake the silence with its breath, a land of loneliness and death. At length the hardy pioneers by rock and crag found out the way, and woke with voices of today, a silence kept for years and years. Upon the western slope they stood, and saw a wide expanse of plain, as far as eye could stretch or see, go rolling westward endlessly. The native grasses, tall as grain, were waved and rippled in the breeze. From boughs of blossom-laden trees, the parrots answered back again. They saw the land that it was good, a land of fatness all untrod, and gave their silent thanks to God. The way is won, the way is won! And straightway from the barren coast there came a westward marching host, that aye and ever onward pressed, with eager faces to the west, along the pathway of the sun. The mountains saw them marching by, they faced the all-consuming drought. They would not rest in settled land, but taking each his life in hand, their faces ever westward bent, beyond the farthest settlement, responding to the challenge cry of better country further out. And lo, a miracle! The land but yesterday was all unknown. The wild man's boomerang was thrown where now great busy cities stand. It was not much, you say, that these should win their way where none withstood. In sooth, there was not much of blood, nor war was fought between the seas. It was not much, but we who know the strange, capricious land they trod, at times a stricken, parching sod, at times with raging floods beset, through which they found their lonely way, are quite content that you should say it was not much, while we can feel that nothing in the ages old, in song or story written yet, on Grecian urn or Roman arch, though it should ring with clash of steel, could braver histories unfold than this bush story yet untold, the story of their westward march. But times are changed, and changes rung from old to new, the olden days. The old bush life and all its ways are passing from us all unsung. The freedom and the hopeful sense of toil that brought due recompense, of room for all, has passed away, and lies forgotten with the dead. Within our streets men cry for bread, in cities built but yesterday. About us stretches wealth of land, a boundless wealth of virgin soil, as yet unfruitful and untilled. Our willing workmen, strong and skilled, within our cities idle stand, and cry aloud for leave to toil. The stunted children come and go, in squalid lanes and alleys black. We follow but the beaten track of other nations, and we grow in wealth for some, for many woe. And it may be that we who live in this new land apart, beyond the hard old world grown fierce and fond, and bound by precedent and bond, may read the riddle right and give new hope to those who dimly see that all things may be yet for good, and teach the world at length to be one vast united brotherhood. So may it be, and he who sings in accents hopeful, clear, and strong, the glories which that future brings, shall sing indeed a wondrous song. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Anthony Considine by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Pris Chan. Out in the wastes of the West Country, out where the white stars shine, grim and silent as such men be, rideth a man with a history, Anthony Considine. For the ways of men they are manifold, as their differing views in life, for some are sold for the lust of gold, and some for the lust of strife. But this man counted the world well lost, for the love of his neighbour's wife. They fled together, as those must flee, whom all men hold in blame. Each to the other must all things be, who cross the gulf of iniquity, and live in the land of shame. But alight a love, if she sins with one, she sinneth with 99. The rule holds good since the world begun, since ever the streams began to run, and the stars begun to shine. The rule holds true, and he found it true, Anthony Considine. A nobler spirit had turned in scorn from a love that was stained with mire. A weaker being might mourn and mourn for the loss of his heart's desire, but the anger of Anthony Considine blazed up like a flaming fire. And she, with her new love presently, came past with her eyes ashine, and God so willed it, and God knows why, she turned and laughed as they passed him by, Anthony Considine. Her laughter stung as a whip might sting, and mad with his wounded pride, he turned and sprang with a panther's spring, and struck at his rival's side, and only the woman, shuddering, could tell how the dead man died. She dared not speak, and the mystery is buried in Auld Lang Syne, but out on the wastes of the West Country, grim and silent as such men be, rideth a man with a history, Anthony Considine. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Song of the Artesian Water by Andrew Barton Paterson. read for LibriVox.org by Aaron Grassi. Song of the Artesian Water. Now the stock have started dying, for the Lord has sent a drought. But we're sick of prayers and providence. We're going to do without. With the derricks up above us and the solid earth below, we are waiting at the lever for the word to let her go. Sinking down, deeper down. Oh, we'll sink it deeper down. As the drill is plugging downward at 1,000 feet of level, if the Lord won't send us water, oh, we'll get it from the devil. Yes, we'll get it from the devil deeper down. Now our engine's built in Glasgow by a very canny Scot, and he marked it 20 horsepower, but he don't know what is what. When Canadian Bill is firing with the sun-dried gidgee logs, she can equal 30 horses and a score or so of dogs. Sinking down, deeper down. Oh, we're going deeper down. If we fail to get the water, then it's ruin to the squatter. For the drought is on the station and the weather's growing hotter, but we're bound to get the water deeper down. But the shaft has started caving, and the sinking's very slow, and the yellow rods are bending in the water down below. And the tubes are always jamming, and they can't be made to shift till we nearly burst the engine with a 40 horsepower lift, sinking down, deeper down. Oh, we're going deeper down, though the shaft is always caving, and the tubes are always jamming. Yet we'll fight our way to water while the stubborn drill is ramming, deeper down. But there's no artesian water, though we've passed 3,000 feet, and the contract price is growing, and the boss is nearly beat. But it must be down beneath us, and it's down we've got to go, though she's bumping on the solid rock 4,000 feet below. Sinking down, deeper down. Oh, we're going deeper down. And it's time they heard us knocking on the roof of Satan's dwellin'. But we'll get artesian water if we cave the roof of Helen. Oh, we'll get artesian water deeper down. But it's hark! The whistle's blowing with a wild, exultant blast. And the boys are madly cheering, for they've struck the flow at last, and it's rushing up the tubing from 4,000 feet below till it spouts above the casing in a 1,000,000-gallon flow, and it's down, deeper down. Oh, it comes from deeper down. It is flowing, ever flowing in a free, unstinted measure from the silent, hidden places where the old earth hides her treasure, deeper down. And it's clear away the timber, and it's let the water run, how it glimmers in the shadow, how it flashes in the sun. By the silent belts of timber, by the miles of blazing plain, it is bringing hope and comfort to the thirsty land again. Flowing down, further down. It is flowing further down to the tortured, thirsty cattle, bringing gladness in its going. Through the droughty days of summer, it is flowing, ever flowing, it is flowing, ever flowing, further down. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
A Disqualified Jockey Story by Andrew Barton Paterson, read for LibriVox.org by Algie Pug. You see, the thing was this way. It was me that rode Penelope, the Splendor mare, and Ikey Chambers on the Iron Duke, and Smith, the half-caste rider, on Regret, and that long bloke from Wagga, him what rode Veroniku, the Snowy River horse. Well, none of them had chances, not a chance among the lot, unless the rest fell dead, or wasn't trying. For a blind man's dog could see Enchantress was a certain cop, and all the books was layin' 6-4. They brought her out to show our lot the road, or so they said. But then, Gord's truth, you know, you can't believe 'em, though they took an oath on 40 Bibles that they tell the truth. But anyhow, an amateur was up on this Enchantress, and so, Ike and me, we thought that we might frighten him a bit by asking if he minded riding rough. "Oh, not at all," says he. "Oh, not at all. I learn at Robbo Park, and if it comes to bumping, I'm your Moses. Strike me blue," says he. "I'll bump you over either rail, the inside rail or outside, whichever you choose is good enough for me." Which settled Ike, for he was shaky since he near got killed from being sent a buster on the rail, when some chap bumped his horse and fetched him down at Stony Bridge. So Ikey thought it best to leave this bloke alone, and I agreed. So all the books was layin' 6-4 against the favourite, and the amateur was walking this enchantress up and down, and me and Smithy backed him, for we thought we might as well get something for ourselves, because we knew our horses couldn't win. But Ikey wouldn't back him for a bob, because he said he reckoned he was stiff, and all the books was laying 6-4. Well, anyhow, before the start, the news got round that this here amateur was stiff, and all our good stuff was blued, and all the books was in it, and the prices lengthened out, and every book was bustin' of his throat and layin' 5-1 the favourite. So there was we that couldn't win ourselves, and this here amateur that wouldn't try, and all the books was layin' 5-1. So Smithy says to me, "You take a hold of that there moke of yours, and round the turn come up behind Enchantress with the whip, and let her have it. That long bloke and me will wait ahead, and when she comes to us we'll pass her on and belt her down the straight, and Ikey'll flog her home, because his boss is judge and steward and the Lord knows what, and so he won't be touched. And as for us, we'll swear we only hit her by mistake, and all the books was layin' 5-1. Well, off we went, and comin' to the turn, I saw the amateur was holding back, and poking into every hole he could to get her blocked, and so I pulled behind and drew the whip and dropped it on the mare. I let her have it twice, and then she shot ahead of me, and Smithy opened out and led her up beside him on the rails, and kept her there a-beltin' her like smoke, until she struggled past him, pullin' hard, and came to Ike. But Ikey drew his whip and hit her on the nose and sent her back, and won the race himself. For, after all, it seems he had a fiver on the Duke, and never told us. So our stuff was lost, and then they had us up for riding foul, and warned us off the tracks for 12 months each, to get our living any way we could. But Ikey wasn't touched, because his boss was judge and steward and the Lord knows what. But, mister, if you'll lend us £50, I know 3 certain winners at the park, 3 certain cops as no one knows but me. And, thank you, mister, come and have a beer. I always like a beer about this time. Well, so long, mister, till we meet again." End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Road to Gundagai by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Steve C. The mountain road goes up and down from Gundagai to Tumut town, and branching off there runs a track across the foothills grim and black, across the plains and ranges grey, to Sydney city far away. It came by chance one day that I from Tumut rode to Gundagai, and reached about the evening tide the crossing where the roads divide, and, waiting at the crossing place, I saw a maiden fair of face, with eyes of deepest violet blue, and cheeks to match the rose in hue, The fairest maids Australia knows are bred among the mountain snows. Then, fearing I might go astray, I asked if she could show the way. Her voice might well a man bewitch, its tones so supple, deep, and rich. "The tracks are clear," she made reply, "and this goes down to Sydney town, and that one goes to Gundagai." Then slowly looking coyly back, she went along the Sydney track. And I for one was well content to go the road the lady went. But round the turn a swain she met, the kiss she gave him haunts me yet. I turned and travelled with a sigh the lonely road to Gundagai. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Saltbush Bill's Second Fight by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Aaron Grassi. Saltbush Bill's Second Fight. The news came down on the Castlereagh and went to the world at large that 20,000 traveling sheep with Saltbush Bill in charge were drifting down from a dried-out run to ravage the Castlereagh. And the squatters swore when they heard the news, and wished they were well away, for the name and the fame of Saltbush Bill were over the countryside for the wonderful way that he fed his sheep, and the dodges and tricks he tried. He would lose his way on a main stock route and stray to the squatter's grass. He would come to a run with the boss away and swear he had leave to pass. And back of all, and behind it all, as well the squatters knew, if he had to fight, he would fight all day, so long as his sheep got through. But this is the story of Stingy Smith, the owner of Hard Times Hill, and the way that he chanced on a fighting man to reckon with Saltbush Bill. 'Twas Stingy Smith on his stockyard sat, and prayed for an early spring, when he stared at the sight of a clean-shaved tramp who walked with jaunty swing. For a clean-shaved tramp with a jaunty walk a-swinging along the track is as rare a thing as a feathered frog on the desolate roads out back. So the tramp he made for the traveller's hut, and asked could he camp the night. But Stingy Smith had a bright idea, and he said to him, "Can you fight?" "Why, what's the game?" said the clean-shaved tramp as he looked at him up and down. "If you want a battle, get off that fence and I'll kill you for half a crown. But, boss, you'd better not fight with me. It wouldn't be fair nor right. I'm Stiffener Joe from the Rocks Brigade, and I killed a man in a fight. I served 2 years for it, fair and square. And now I'm a-trampin' back to look for a peaceful, quiet life away on the outside track." "Oh, it's not myself, but a drover chap," said Stingy Smith with glee. "A bullying fellow called Saltbush Bill, and you are the man for me. He's on the road with his hungry sheep, and he's certain to raise a row, for he's bullied the whole of Castlereagh till he's got them under cow. Just pick a quarrel, and raise a fight, and leather him good and hard, and I'll take good care that his wretched sheep don't wander a half a yard. It's a 5-pound job if you belt him well. Do anything short of kill, for there isn't a beak on the Castlereagh will find you for Saltbush Bill." "I'll take the job," said the fighting man, "and hot as this cove appears, he'll stand no chance with a bloke like me, what's lived on the game for years. For he's maybe learnt in a boxing school and sparred for a round or so, but I've fought all hands in a 10-foot ring each night in a travelling show. They earned £1 if they stayed 3 rounds, and they tried for it every night. In a 10-foot ring! Oh, that's the game that teaches a bloke to fight. For they'd rush and clinch. It was Dublin rules. And we drew no colour line. And they all tried hard for to earn the £1, but they got no £1 of mine. If I saw no chance in the opening round, I'd slog at their wind and wait till an opening came. And it always came. And I settled 'em, sure as fate. Left on the ribs and right on the jaw, and when the chance comes, make sure. And it's there a professional bloke like me gets home on an amateur. For it's my experience every day, and I make no doubt it's yours, that a third-class pro is an overmatch for the best of the amateurs. "Oh, take your swag to the traveler's hut," said Smith, "for you waste your breath. You've a first-class chance if you lose the fight of talking your man to death. I'll tell the cook you're to have your grub, and see that you eat your fill, and come to the scratch all fit and well to leather this Saltbush Bill." 'Twas Saltbush Bill and his traveling sheep were wending their weary way on the main stock route through the Hard Times Run on their 6-mile stage a day. And he strayed a mile from the main stock route and started to feed along. And when Stingy Smith came up, Bill said that the route was surveyed wrong, and he tried to prove that the sheep had rushed and strayed from their camp at night. But the fighting man, he kicked Bill's dog, and of course that meant a fight. So they sparred and fought, and they shifted ground, and never a sound was heard but the thudding fists on their brawny ribs and the second's muttered word. Till the fighting man shot home his left on the ribs with a mighty clout, and his right flashed up with a half-arm blow, and Saltbush Bill went out. He fell face down and towards the blow, and their hearts with fear were filled, for he lay as still as a fallen tree, and they thought that he must be killed. So Stingy Smith and the fighting man, they lifted him from the ground, and sent to home for a brandy flask, and they slowly fetched him round. But his head was bad, and his jaw was hurt. In fact, he could scarcely speak. So they let him spell till he got his wits, and he camped on the run a week, while the traveling sheep went here and there, wherever they liked to stray, till Saltbush Bill was fit once more for the track to the Castlereagh. Then Stingy Smith, he wrote a note, and gave to the fighting man. 'Twas writ to the boss of the neighbouring run, and thus the missive ran. "The man with this is a fighting man, one Stiffner Joe by name. He came near murdering Saltbush Bill, and I found it a costly game, but it's worth your while to employ the chap, for there isn't the slightest doubt you'll have no trouble from Saltbush Bill while this man hangs about." But an answer came by the next week's mail with news that might well appall. "The man you sent with a note is not a fighting man at all. He has shaved his beard and has cut his hair, but I spotted him at a look. He is Tom Devine, who has worked for years for Saltbush Bill as cook. Bill coached him up in the fighting yarn and taught him the tale by rote, and they shammed to fight, and they got your grass, and divided your 5-pound note. 'Twas a clean take-in, and you'll find it wise. 'Twill save you a lot of pelf. When next you're hiring a fighting man, just fight him around yourself." And the teamsters out on the Castlereagh, when they meet with a week of rain, and the wagon sinks to its axle-tree deep down in the black soil plain, when the bullocks wade in a sea of mud and strain at the load of wool, and the cattle dogs at the bullocks' heels are biting to make them pull, when the offside driver flays the team and curses them while he flogs, and the air's thick with the language used and the clamor of men and dogs, the teamsters say, as they pause to rest and moisten each hairy throat, they wish they could swear like Stingy Smith when he read that neighbor's note. End of poem. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Hard Luck by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Aaron Grassi. Hard Luck. I left the course, and by my side there walked a ruined tout, a hungry creature evil-eyed, who poured this story out. "You see," he said, "there came a swell to Kensington today, and if I picked the winners well, a crown at least he'd pay. I picked 3 winners straight, I did. I filled his purse with pelf, and then he gave me half a quid to back one for myself. A half a quid to me he cast. I wanted it indeed. So help me, Bob, for 2 days past I haven't had a feed. But still I thought my luck was in, I couldn't go astray. I put it all on little Min, and lost it straight away. I haven't got a bite or bed. I'm absolutely stuck. So keep this lesson in your head. Don't overtrust your luck." The folks went homeward near and far. The tout, oh, where is he? Ask where the empty boilers are, beside the circular quay. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Song of the Federation by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Algie Pug. As the nations sat together, grimly waiting, the fierce old nations, battle-scarred, grown grey in their lusting and their hating, ever armed and ever ready, keeping guard, through the tumult of their warlike preparation, and the half-stilled clamour of the drums, came a voice crying, "Lo, a new-made nation, to her place in the sisterhood she comes." And she came, she was beautiful as morning, with the bloom of the roses in her mouth, like a young queen lavishly adorning her charms with the splendours of the south. And the fierce old nations, looking on her, said, "Nay, surely she were quickly overthrown. Hath she strength for the burden laid upon her? Hath she power to protect and guard her own?" Then she spoke, and her voice was clear and ringing in the ears of the nations old and grey, saying, "Hark, and ye shall hear my children singing their war songs in countries far away. They are strangers to the tumult of the battle. They are few, but their hearts are very strong. 'Twas but yesterday they called unto the cattle, but they now sing Australia's marching song." Song of the Australians in Action. For the honour of Australia, our mother, side by side with our kin from oversea, we have fought and we have tested one another, and enrolled among the brotherhood are we. There never was post of danger but we sought it in the fighting, through the fire and through the flood. There was never prize so costly but we bought it, though we paid for its purchase with our blood. Was there any road too rough for us to travel? Was there any path too far for us to tread? You can track us by the blood drops on the gravel, on the roads that we milestoned with our dead. And for you, O our young and anxious mother, all your great gains keeping watch and ward, neither fearing nor despising any other, we will hold your possessions with the sword. Then they passed to the place of world-long sleeping, the grey-clad figures with their dead, to the sound of their women softly weeping, and the Dead March moaning at their head. And the nations, as the grim procession ended, whispered, "Child, but ye have seen the price we pay, from war may we ever be defended. Kneel ye down, new-made sister, let us pray." End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Old Australian Ways by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by T.J. Burns. The London lights are far abeam, behind a bank of cloud. Along the shore the gaslights gleam, the gale is piping loud. And down the channel, groping blind, we drive her through the haze, towards the land we left behind. The good old land of never mind and old Australian ways. The narrow ways of English folk are not for such as we. They bear the long accustomed yoke of staid conservancy. But all our roads are new and strange, and through our blood there runs the vagabonding love of change that drove us westward of the range and westward of the suns. The city folk go to and fro behind a prison's bars. They never feel the breezes blow and never see the stars. They never hear in blossomed trees the music low and sweet of wild birds making melodies, nor catch the little laughing breeze that whispers in the wheat. Our fathers came of roving stock that could not fixed abide, and we have followed field and flock since ever we learned to ride. By miner's camp and shearing shed, in land of heat and drought, we followed where our fortunes led, with fortunes always on ahead and always further out. The wind is in the barley grass, the wattles are in bloom, the breezes greet us as they pass with honey sweet perfume. The parakeets go screaming by with flash of golden wing, and from the swamp the wild ducks cry their long-drawn note of revelry, rejoicing at the spring. So throw the weary pen aside and let the papers rest, for we must saddle up and ride towards the blue hill's breast, and we must travel far and fast across their rugged maze to find the spring of youth at last, and call back from the buried past the old Australian ways. When Clancy took the drover's track, in years of long ago, he drifted to the outer back, beyond the overflow. By rolling plain and rocky shelf, with stockwhip in his hand, he reached at last, oh lucky elf, the town of Come and Help Yourself, in rough and ready land. And if it be that you would know the tracks he used to ride, then you must saddle up and go beyond the Queensland side, beyond the reach of rule or law, to ride the long day through in nature's homestead filled with awe. You then might see what Clancy saw, and know what Clancy knew. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Ballad of the Calliope by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Aaron Grassi. The Ballad of the Calliope. By the far Samoan shore, where the league-long rollers pour all the wash of the Pacific on the coral-guarded bay, riding lightly at their ease in the calm of tropic seas, the three great nations' warships at their anchors proudly lay. Riding lightly, head to wind, with the coral reefs behind, 3 Germans and 3 Yankee ships were mirrored in the blue, and on one ship unfurled was the flag that rules the world, for on the old Calliope the flag of England flew. When the gentle offshore breeze that had scarcely stirred the trees dropped down to utter stillness, and the glass began to fall, away across the main lowered the coming hurricane, and far away to seaward hung the cloud-rack like a pall. If the word had passed around, "Let us move to safer ground, let us steam away to seaward," then this tale were not to tell. But each captain seemed to say, "If the others stay, I stay," and they lingered at their moorings till the shades of evening fell. Then the cloud-rack neared them fast, and there came a sudden blast, and the hurricane came leaping down 1,000 miles of main. Like a lion on its prey leapt the storm fiend on the bay, and the vessels shook and shivered as their cables felt the strain. As the surging seas came by, that were running mountains high, the vessels started dragging, drifting slowly to the lee, and the darkness of the night hid the coral reefs from sight, and the captains dared not risk the chance to grope their way to sea. In the dark they dared not shift. They were forced to wait and drift. All hands stood by uncertain, would the anchors hold or no. But the men on deck could see if a chance of hope might be. There was little chance of safety for the men who were below. Through that long, long night of dread, while the storm raged overhead, they were waiting by their engines with the furnace fires aroar. So they waited, staunch and true, though they knew, and well they knew, they must drown like rats imprisoned if the vessel touched the shore. When the grey dawn broke at last, and the long, long night was past, while the hurricane redoubled, lest its prey should steal away, on the rocks all smashed and strewn were the German vessels thrown, while the Yankees, swamped and helpless, drifted shorewards down the bay. Then at last spoke Captain Kane. "All our anchors are in vain, and the Germans and the Yankees, they have drifted to the lee. Cut the cables at the bow. We must trust the engines now. Give her steam, and let her have it, lads. We'll fight her out to sea." And the answer came with cheers from the stalwart engineers, from the grim and grimy firemen at the furnaces below, and above the sullen roar of the breakers on the shore came the throbbing of the engines as they labored to and fro. If the strain should find a flaw, should a bolt or rivet draw, then God help them, for the vessel were a plaything in the tide. With a face of honest cheer, quoth an English engineer, "I will answer for the engines that were built on old Thames side, for the stays and stanchions taut, for the rivets truly wrought, for the valves that fit their faces as a glove should fit the hand. Give her every ounce of power. If we make a knot an hour, then it's away enough to steer her, and we'll drive her from the land." Like a foam flake tossed and thrown, she could barely hold her own, while the other ships all helplessly were drifting to the lee. Through the smother and the rout, the Calliope steamed out, and they cheered her from the Trenton that was foundering in the sea. Aye, drifting shoreward there, all helpless as they were, their vessel hurled upon the reefs as weed ashore is hurled. Without a thought of fear, the Yankees raised a cheer that English-speaking folk should echo round the world. End of poem. This poem is in the public domain.
Do They Know? By Andrew Barton Paterson, read for LibriVox.org by Larry Wilson. Do they know? At the turn of the strait where the favorites fail, and every atom of weight is telling its tale, as some grim old stayer, hard pressed, runs true to his breed, and with head just in front of the rest, fights on in the lead, when the jockeys are out with the whips, with a furlong to go, and the backers grow white to the lips, do you think they don't know? Do they know, as they come back to weigh in a whirlwind of cheers, though the spurs have left marks of the fray, though the sweat on the ears gathers cold, and they sob with distress as they roll up the track, they know just as well their success as the man on their back, as they walk through a dense human lane that sways to and fro and cheers them again and again. Do you think they don't know? End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Passing of Gundagai by Andrew Barton Paterson, read for LibriVox.org by Kim Gibbs. The Passing of Gundagai. "I'll introduce a friend," he said, "and if you've got a vacant pen, you'd better take him in the shed and start him shearing straight ahead. He's one of these here quiet men. He never strikes. That ain't his game. No matter what the others try, he goes on shearing just the same. I never rightly knew his name. We always called him Gundagai. Our flashest shearer then had gone to train a racehorse for a race, and while his sporting fit was on, he couldn't be relied upon, so Gundagai shore in his place. Alas, for man's veracity, for reputations false and true, this Gundagai turned out to be, for strife and all-round villainy, the very worst I ever knew. He started racing Jack Devine, and grumbled when I made him stop. The pace he showed was extra fine, but all those purebred ewes of mine were bleeding like a butcher's shop. He cursed the sheep, he cursed the shed, from roof to rafter, floor to shelf. As for my mongrel ewes, he said, I ought to get a razor blade and shave the blooming things myself. On Sundays he controlled a school, and played 2-up the livelong day, and many a young confiding fool he shore of his financial wool, and when he lost he would not pay. He organized a shearers' race, and touched me to provide the prize. His pack-horse showed surprising pace, and won, hands down. He was the ace, a well-known racehorse in disguise. The next day the bruiser of the shed displayed an opal-tinted eye, with large contusions on his head. He smiled a sickly smile and said he'd had a cut at Gundagai. But just as we were getting full of Gundagai and all his ways, a telegram for Henry Bull arrived. Said he, "That's me, all wool. Let's see what this here message says." He opened it. His face grew white. He dropped the shears and turned away. It ran, "Your wife took bad last night. Come home at once. No time to write. We fear she may not last the day." He got his check. I didn't care to dock him for my mangled ewes. His store account, we called it square. Poor wretch, he had enough to bear, confronted by such dreadful news. The shearers raised a little purse, to help a mate, as shearers will, to pay the doctor and the nurse, and if there should be something worse, to pay the undertaker's bill. They wrung his hand in sympathy. He rode away without a word. His head hung down in misery. A wandering hawker passing by was told of what had just occurred. "Well, that's a curious thing," he said. "I've known that feller all his life. He's had the loan of this here shed. I know his wife ain't nearly dead, because he hasn't got a wife." You should have heard the whipcord crack as angry shearers galloped by. In vain they tried to fetch him back. A little dust along the track was all they saw of Gundagai. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Wargeilah Handicap by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by T.J. Burns. Wargeilah town is very small. There's no cathedral nor a club. In fact, the township, all in all, is just one unpretentious pub. And there, from all the stations round, the local sportsmen can be found. The sportsmen of Wargeilah side are very few, but very fit. There's scarcely any sport been tried but what they held their own at it. In fact, to search their records o'er, they held their own and something more. 'Twas round about Wargeilah town an English new chum did infest. He used to wander up and down, in baggy English breeches dressed. His mental aspect seemed to be just stolid self-sufficiency. The local sportsmen vainly sought his tranquil calm to counteract, by urging that he should be brought within the noxious creatures act. "Nay, harm him not," said one more wise. "He's a blessing in disguise. You see, he wants to buy a horse, to ride and hunt and steeplechase, and carry ladies too, of course, and pull a cart and win a race. Good gracious, he must be a flat to think he'll get a horse like that. But since he has so little sense, and such a lot of cash to burn, we'll send him some experience, by which alone a fool can learn. Suppose we let him have the trap, to win Wargeilah Handicap. And here I must explain to you that round about Wargeilah Run there lived a very aged screw, whose days of brilliancy were done, a grand old warrior in his prime, but age will beat us all in time. A trooper's horse in seasons past He did his share to keep the peace, but took to falling, and, at last, was cast for age from the police. A publican at Conroy's Gap then bought and christened him the Trap. When grass was good and horses dear, he changed his owner now and then, at prices ranging somewhere near the neighborhood of £2.10, and manfully he earned his keep by yarding cows and rationed sheep. They brought him in from off the grass, and fed and groomed the old horse up. His coat began to shine like glass. You'd think he'd win the Melbourne Cup. And when they got him fat and flash, they asked the new chum 50 cash. And when he said the price was high, their indignation knew no bounds. They said, "It's seldom you can buy a horse like that for £50. We'll refund 20 if the Trap should fail to win the handicap." The deed was done, the price was paid. The new chum put the horse in train. The local sports were much afraid that he would sad experience gain by racing with some shearer's hack, who'd beat him halfway round the track. So on this guileless English spark they did most fervently impress that he must keep the matter dark, and not let any person guess that he was purchasing the Trap to win Wargeilah Handicap. They spoke of spielers from the Bland and champions from Castlereagh, and gave the youth to understand that all of these would stop away and spoil the race if they should hear that they had got the Trap to fear. Keep dark, they'll muster thick as flies when once the news gets sent around. We're giving such a splendid prize, a Snowdon horse worth £50. They'll come right in from Dandaloo and find that it's a gift to you. The race came on with no display, nor any calling of the card, but round about the pub all day a crowd of shearers drinking hard, and using language in a strain 'twere flattery to call profane. Our hero, dressed in silk attire, blue jacket and a scarlet cap, with boots that shone like flames of fire, now did his canter on the Trap, and walked him up and round about until the other steeds came out. He eyed them with a haughty look, but saw a sight that caught his breath. It was John, the Chinese cook, in boots and breeches pale as death, tied with a rope like any sack upon a piebald pony's back. The next, a colt, all mud and burrs, half broken with a black boy up, who said, "You give me a pair of spurs, I win the blooming Melbourne Cup." These two were to oppose the Trap for the Wargeilah Handicap. They're off! The colt whipped down his head, and humped his back and gave a squeal, and bucked into the drinking shed, revolving like a Catherine wheel. Men ran like rats. The atmosphere was filled with oaths and pints of beer. But up the course the bold John, beside the Trap, raced neck and neck. The boys had tied him firmly on, which ultimately proved his wreck. The saddle turned, and like a clown he rode some distance upside down. His legs around the horse were tied, his feet towards the heavens were spread. He swung and bumped at every stride, and ploughed the ground up with his head. And when they rescued him, the Trap had won Wargeilah Handicap. And no inquiries we could make could tell by what false statements swayed John was led to undertake a task so foreign to his trade. He only smiled and said, "Hokey, I stop topside, I win allee." But never in Wargeilah town was heard so eloquent a cheer as when the president came down and toasted in colonial beer the finest rider on the course, the winner of the Snowdon horse. "You go and get the prize," he said. "He's with a wild mob somewhere round the mountains near the watershed. He's honestly worth £50, a noble horse indeed to win, but none of us can run him in. We've chased him poor, we've chased him fat. We've run him till our horses dropped. But by such obstacles as that, a man like you will not be stopped. You'll go and yard him any day. So here's your health. Hooray, hooray. The day wound up with booze and blow, and fights till all were well content. But of the new chum all I know is shown by this advertisement. For sale the well-known racehorse Trap. He won Wargeilah Handicap. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Any Other Time by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read by LibriVox by Brianna. All of us play our very best game any other time. Golf or billiards, it's all the same any other time. Lose a match and you always say, "Just my luck, I was off today." I could have beaten him quite halfway any other time. After a fiver you ought to go any other time. Every man that you ask says, "Oh, any other time." Lend you a fiver? I'd lend you two, but I'm overdrawn and my bills are due. Wish you'd ask me, now mind you do, any other time. Fellows will ask you out to dine any other time. Not tonight for Weir 29, any other time. Not tomorrow for cook's on strike. Not next day, I'll be out on the bike. Just drop in whenever you like, any other time. Seasick passengers like the sea, any other time. Something I ate disagreed with me any other time. Ocean traveling is simply bliss. Must be my liver has gone amiss. Why, I would laugh at a sea like this any other time. Most of us mean to be better men any other time. Regular upright characters then any other time. Yet somehow, as the years go by, still we gamble and drink and lie. When it comes to the last, we'll want to die any other time. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Last Trump by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by T.J. Burns. "You led the trump," the old man said, with fury in his eye, "and yet you hope my girl to wed. Young man, your hopes of love are fled. 'Twere better she should die. My sweet young daughter sitting there, so innocent and plump, you don't suppose that she would care to wed an outlawed man who'd dare to lead the 13th trump? If you had drawn their leading spade, it meant a certain win. But no, by Pembroke's mighty shade, the 13th trump you went and played, and let their diamonds in. My girl, return at my command his presents in a lump. Return his ring, for understand, no man is fit to hold your hand who leads the 13th trump. But hold, give every man his due, and every dog his day. Speak up and say what made you do this dreadful thing, that is, if you have anything to say." He spoke. "I meant at first," said he, "to give their spades a bump, or lead the hearts, but then you see I thought against us there might be, perhaps, a 14th trump. They buried him at dawn of day beside a ruined stump, and there he sleeps the hours away, and waits for Gabriel to play the 14th trump." End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Tar and Feathers by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org. Oh, the circus swooped down on the Narrabri town, for the Narrabri populace moneyed are, and the showman he smiled at the folk he beguiled to come all the distance from Canada. But a juvenile smart, who objected to part, went in on the nad, and to do it he crawled in through a crack in the tent at the back, for the boy had no slight ingenuity. And says he with a grin, "That's the way to get in, but I reckon I'd better be quiet, or they'll splificate me." And he chuckled, for he had the loan of the circus proprietor. But the showman astute on that wily galoot soon dropped, and you'll say that he lathered him. Not he, with a grim sort of a humorous whim, he took him and tarred him and feathered him. Says he, "You can go round the world with a show, and knock every Injun and Arab rye, with your name and your trade on the posters displayed. The feathered, what is it from Narrabri?" Next day for his freak, by a Narrabri beak, he was jawed with a deal of verbosity, for his only appeal was professional zeal. He wanted another monstrosity. Said his worship, "Begob, you are fined 40 bob, and 6 shillings cost to the clerk," he says. And the Narrabri joy, half bird and half boy, has a down on himself and on circuses. End of poem. This work is in public domain. It's Grand by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org. It's grand to be a squatter, and sit upon a post, and watch your little ewes and lambs a giving up the ghost. It's grand to be a cocky, with wife and kids to keep, and find an all-wise Providence has mustered all your sheep. It's grand to be a Western man, with shovel in your hand, to dig your little homestead out from underneath the sand. It's grand to be a shearer along the Darling side, and pluck the wool from stinking sheep that some day since have died. It's grand to be a rabbit, and breed till all is blue, and then to die in heaps because there's nothing left to chew. It's grand to be a minister, and travel like a swell, and tell the Central District folk to go to Inverell. It's grand to be a socialist, and lead the bold array that marches to prosperity at 7 bob a day. It's grand to be an unemployed, and lie in the domain, and wake up every second day, and go to sleep again. It's grand to borrow English tin, to pay for wharves and locks, and then to find it isn't in the little money box. It's grand to be a Democrat, and toady to the mob, for fear that if you told the truth, they'd hunt you from your job. It's grand to be a lot of things in this fair southern land, but if the Lord would send us rain, that would indeed be grand. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. Out of Sight by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org. They held a polo meeting at a little country town, and all the local sportsmen came to win themselves renown. There came 2 strangers with a horse, and I am much afraid they both belong to what is called the Take You Down Brigade. They said their horse could jump like fun, and asked an amateur to ride him in the steeplechase, and told him they were sure the last time round he'd sail away with such a swallow's flight, the rest would never see him go. He'd finish out of sight. So out he went, and when folks saw the amateur was up, some local genius called the race the Dude in Danger Cup. The horse was known as Who's Afraid by panic from the fright but still his owners told the jock he'd finish out of sight. And so he did, for who's afraid, without the least pretense, disposed of him by rushing through the very second fence. And when they ran the last time round, the prophecy was right, for he was in the ambulance and safely out of sight. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Road to Old Man's Town by Andrew Barton Paterson. Read for LibriVox.org by Larry Wilson. The fields of youth are filled with flowers. The wine of youth is strong. What need have we to count the hours? The summer days are long. But soon we find to our dismay that we are drifting down the barren slopes that fall away towards the foothills grim and gray that lead to Old Man's Town. And marching with us on the track full many friends we find. We see them looking sadly back for those that dropped behind. But God forbid a fate so dread, alone to travel down the dreary road we all must tread, with faltering steps and whitening head, the road to Old Man's Town. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.